He was a loving husband. She was a devoted wife. Together, they built a quiet life in the suburbs, one that should have been filled with love, trust, and security. But behind closed doors, something far more sinister was brewing. One fateful night, while he slept, Jennifer Gledhill made a choice that would shatter everything. With a single pull of the trigger, she ended her husband's life in an act so cold, so deliberate, that it sent shockwaves through their community. But this wasn't just a crime of passion, it was the beginning of something far more twisted. What followed was a tangled web of lies, a desperate cover-up, and a betrayal so deep it would leave even those closest to Jennifer questioning everything they thought they knew. What pushed her to commit the unthinkable? And how did her own family become entangled in the deception? The truth behind this case is darker than you can imagine. Stay with us as we uncover the chilling story of Jennifer Gledhill, a wife, a mother, and a murderer. It all began with a moment, a single, unforgivable moment. As Matthew slept, Jennifer made a decision that would set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. She raised a weapon in the dead of night and took his life. But the real story doesn't end there. In the aftermath, there would be no remorse, no guilt, not at first. Only a desperate attempt to cover her tracks, to erase the horror of what she had done. But sometimes, no matter how hard someone tries to hide the truth has a way of finding its way out. And in Jennifer's case, it did. The lies she told, the deception she wove, none of it would protect her from the inevitable discovery. Because there's something far more dangerous than the act itself, the cover-up. As the investigation unfolds, we learn of secrets, confessions, and betrayals. What was hidden beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect family? Was Jennifer truly the loving wife she appeared to be? Or was there a side to her, a side the world never saw, that led her to murder her own husband? This story is more than just a tragedy. It's a chilling look at what happens when trust is shattered and when love gives way to something far darker. This is the story of Jennifer Gledhill, a woman who killed her husband in the most brutal way imaginable, and the chilling events that followed. It's a story that will make you question how well you know the people closest to you, and whether anyone can truly be trusted. Jennifer Gledhill seemed like any other normal woman, living a life many would wish. A mother, a wife, a woman deeply embedded in the rhythm of everyday life, soccer games, PTA meetings, family dinners. Her neighbors saw her as just another part of the fabric of this tight-knit community. But underneath that facade, something was going wrong. A marriage. A trust. And eventually, a life. Jennifer wasn't always the woman we see now. She had dreams, aspirations, things that didn't align with the life she had built. The pressure of her marriage and a growing sense of dissatisfaction began to consume her. But for all the outward appearances of a happy family, there were cracks in the foundation, cracks that were widening with every passing day. Was it the weight of the everyday that pushed her to the edge, or was it something far darker inside her heart? Then there's Matthew Johnson. A man who seemed to have everything, a loving wife, a career in the military, a family who depended on him. He served his country with pride, embodying the very ideals of duty, honor, and loyalty. But even the most dedicated can be blind to the things right in front of them. Matthew never saw the storm building around him. He never saw the warning signs that his wife was no longer the woman he thought she was. How could he? After all, he trusted her. He trusted that the vows they took, the family they built, meant something. But that trust would be shattered in an instant. This wasn't a moment of sudden rage. It wasn't a crime born out of a single argument. This was months in the making. Months of tension, frustration, and secrets. Jennifer's affair, a secret Matthew was oblivious to, became the catalyst. Betrayal, lies, and guilt built up in Jennifer until, on one fateful night, she decided she couldn't live with it anymore. The life they had built, the family they had once been, was no longer enough for her. She couldn't face the consequences, so she chose a path of no return. Was it revenge? Was it freedom? Or was it something deeper? Whatever it was, the decision was made. And the night of September 21, 2024, would change everything. The question remains, what pushed a woman like Jennifer Gledhill to take such a brutal step? Was it simply a case of a marriage falling apart, or was there something far more sinister lurking in her soul? On the night of September 21, 2024, as most families lay in bed, unaware of the horrors unfolding in their own homes, Jennifer Gledhill made a decision that would forever change the course of her life, and the life of the man she had once vowed to love. The night began like any other. The house was quiet, the only sounds were the distant hum of the neighborhood and the occasional rustling of trees in the cool evening air. Matthew Johnson, a man who had spent his life serving his country, was asleep in their bed. But this wasn't just any night for him. For him, it would be his last. Jennifer, however, was not at rest. While Matthew slept, she moved silently, the weight of her thoughts heavy on her chest. For months, she had been carrying the secret of her affair. And the guilt, perhaps the guilt had driven her mad, or maybe it was something far more twisted. Whatever the cause, the decision was made. She reached for the gun. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It wasn't a crime of passion in the heat of an argument. No, Jennifer had planned this. She had thought about it, over and over, until the thought became an obsession. She had plotted, weighed the consequences, and even prepared for what came next. She had crossed a line she could never return from, and the moment she pulled the trigger, there was no going back. One shot, to the head. A man's life snuffed out in his sleep, in the home he trusted, by the very person he loved. The act was swift, silent, merciless. But the horror was far from over. Jennifer wasn't finished. She wasn't done erasing what she had done. What followed next would only reveal how deep her desperation ran. Jennifer moved Matthew's body from the bed, struggling in the eerie silence of the night. She hid the body, tried to make it disappear. There would be no funeral, no goodbyes, just a cold, calculated disappearance. She drove his body out of town, trying to cover her tracks, as if a man's life could be erased so easily. She buried him in a shallow grave, far from the home they had shared. She cleaned every inch of the crime scene, attempting to erase every trace of her actions. But no matter how much she scrubbed, no matter how many miles she drove, there was no getting rid of what she had done. No amount of cleaning or burying could hide the truth. She could run, she could lie, but she couldn't outrun the consequences. The question now was not whether Jennifer had committed the crime, but how long could she keep her secret? How long before the world learned the truth? After the unthinkable had been done, Jennifer Gledhill's mind shifted from shock to survival. The weight of what she had just done didn't hit her immediately. Instead, she focused solely on the task of covering her tracks. It was a cold, calculated move that would only further entangle her in the web of lies she was spinning. The house, once a place of family, became a crime scene, albeit one that only Jennifer knew about. She moved quickly, cleaning, wiping, and scrubbing every inch of the room where Matthew had lain just moments ago. The bloodstains, evidence of her actions, had to disappear. The gun, the weapon of destruction, had to vanish as if it never existed. Every trace of her crime was erased, as though she was trying to convince herself that it hadn't happened. She could hide the evidence, hide the signs, but could she hide from the truth? As the hours passed, Jennifer's attempts to cover her tracks grew more desperate. And though she tried to leave behind nothing but the illusion of innocence, the walls were slowly closing in. No one saw the bloodstains. No one knew about the body in the grave. But someone did know. What Jennifer didn't count on was the human need for truth. Someone would eventually see through her facade. Someone would eventually speak up. And when that moment came, the cracks in Jennifer's carefully crafted lie began to show. There's a reason we can never truly bury the truth. It has a way of resurfacing when we least expect it. And in Jennifer's case, it began to surface sooner than she thought. Because somewhere, deep in the shadows, someone knew. Someone had heard her confession. Someone who wasn't going to let this go. Jennifer thought she had gotten away with it. She cleaned the house, buried the body, and silenced the screams in her mind. But no matter how carefully she tried to erase the evidence, the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface. It began with a whisper, a confidential informant, someone who knew more than Jennifer ever intended for anyone to know. It wasn't a detective who first uncovered the truth. It wasn't even someone close to the family. It was an unexpected source, a person who had heard Jennifer speak, who had heard her confession. Jennifer didn't realize it at the time, but the weight of her guilt had driven her to speak openly, too openly. The informant's revelation was the first domino to fall. With one simple confession, Jennifer had unwittingly opened the door to her own undoing. Detectives were now alerted, but they weren't working with much, only the vaguest of clues, only whispers of what had happened. But as the investigation grew deeper, they began to connect the dots. The bloodstains on the floor, the strange movements of the family in the days after Matthew's disappearance, the erratic behavior, it all pointed in one direction. And then came the technology, the cold, hard proof. GPS data. Phone records. The trail she thought she had erased led straight back to her. Each step Jennifer had taken that night, each detail she thought she had covered, was now laid bare for investigators. In their search for answers, they pieced together her every move. They found the location where Matthew's body had been disposed of. And most crucially, they found the evidence that tied Jennifer to the crime. It was overwhelming. But there was one thing they didn't have, the body itself. Matthew's final resting place was still unknown, and the search for him continued. While they now knew who had done it, they needed to find him. The pressure mounted on Jennifer, but she wasn't ready to break just yet. The police had their evidence. They had her confession. But they needed the body to complete the picture. Jennifer was trapped, her lies, her cover-up, her entire world crumbling around her. But even then, she clung to the hope that somehow, just maybe, she could still escape the ultimate consequence. Jennifer's days of hiding in the shadows were numbered. With the investigation tightening around her, the weight of the truth finally began to crush her. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and the world was closing in on her every move. It wasn't long before Jennifer's guilt caught up with her. Despite her desperate attempts to shield herself from the inevitable, the evidence was irrefutable. She had been cornered, and the confession was no longer a matter of if, but when. In the quiet of an interrogation room, under the cold, unforgiving gaze of investigators, Jennifer finally gave in. She spoke the words that would seal her fate. "I did it." Just like that, it all came pouring out. The coldness, the meticulous planning, the betrayal. The truth of what she had done was revealed in chilling detail. She described how she shot her husband while he slept, how she then moved his body, buried it, and tried to erase every trace of her crime. There was no remorse in her voice, just an eerie calmness as she explained the events, as if recounting the details of a mere inconvenience rather than a brutal murder. The investigators had the confession they needed, but there was still the matter of Matthew's body. Even with her admission, the search for him continued. Jennifer's confession didn't just reveal her actions, it also revealed a lie she had been telling her family and the world. She had to give them the final piece of the puzzle. After weeks of evasiveness, Jennifer eventually led authorities to Matthew's final resting place. His body, hidden in a shallow grave, was recovered from a remote area, far from the home he had shared with the woman who had promised to protect him. As the news of the body's discovery spread, the full scope of Jennifer's crime became undeniable. But there was still one more twist. The people closest to her, her parents, Thomas and Rosalie Gledhill, had been complicit. They had helped her cover up the crime, aiding in the disposal of evidence and lying to authorities. Their involvement added a new layer of betrayal, one that made the crime all the more horrifying. This wasn't just about Jennifer. This was about an entire family willing to protect each other, even at the cost of justice. And now, as the truth came to light, they too would face the consequences. The revelation of Jennifer's confession did more than just expose a murderer, it exposed the darkness that had been festering beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect life. And with that, the full extent of the tragedy was realized, a life lost, a family destroyed, and the truth finally out in the open. As the dust began to settle, the aftermath of Jennifer Gledhill's horrific actions left a wake of devastation that would echo through the lives of everyone involved. The shocking nature of the crime stunned not just the community but the entire country. How could someone who appeared so ordinary, so familiar, commit such an unspeakable act? For Matthew's family, the pain was unbearable. A man they had known, loved, and respected was gone, taken in the most brutal way by someone they never imagined would harm him. His parents, his children, no one would ever understand why Jennifer did it. His life was violently stolen, and their grief was compounded by the public nature of his death. But the pain didn't stop with Matthew's family. The world watched as Jennifer's own family, her parents, Thomas and Rosalie, were implicated in the cover-up. Their involvement in the crime left the community reeling, as they tried to comprehend how a family could rally around a murderer, shielding her from the consequences of her actions. For them, the guilt was suffocating. They, too, had been deceived, just like everyone else. They had helped Jennifer conceal the crime, turning a blind eye to the truth, convincing themselves they were protecting their daughter rather than facing the reality of what she had done. Jennifer's trial became a spectacle, a story of a woman who murdered her husband, then tried to erase the evidence and lie her way out of it. The courtroom was filled with tension as the prosecution laid out their case, the cold, calculated actions of a woman who had taken a life without hesitation. Her defense, however, tried to paint her as a woman driven to desperation, overwhelmed by a crumbling marriage and a secret affair. But no amount of explanation could take away the fact that Jennifer had pulled the trigger, that Jennifer had taken a life and forever changed the lives of those around her. In the end, the jury didn't buy the defense's story. The truth had been too clear. Jennifer Gledhill was found guilty of first-degree murder, and the weight of the law came down hard on her. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a sentence that would ensure she would never again walk free, never again be part of the world she had once known. And as for Matthew's children, they would grow up without their father. They would have to learn to navigate a world that no longer made sense, where the person who was supposed to protect them had taken away their safety, their security, and their sense of trust. This was no longer just a story of a murder, it was a story of shattered lives, broken families, and the consequences of choices made in the darkest corners of the human soul. For Jennifer, life in prison would become a harsh reminder of the choice she had made that night, the night she took everything away from everyone she loved. She would live with that fact every single day for the rest of her life. And for those left behind, the pain would never fully heal. Because in the end, it wasn't just a life that was lost. It was everything, trust, love, family, all gone in an instant. In the days and months that followed the trial, the story of Jennifer Gledhill's crime continued to haunt everyone who had been touched by it. For those who followed the case, it wasn't just the brutality of the murder that lingered, it was the why. What would drive a woman, someone so seemingly ordinary, to take such a drastic, irreversible step? What went wrong? And what does it say about the human capacity for darkness? Jennifer's actions shook the very foundation of the community she had once been a part of. Friends, neighbors, even casual acquaintances who had known her for years were left grappling with the truth. They had never seen it coming. It was a reminder of how little we often know about those closest to us, how a life that appears so perfect can hide so much beneath the surface. The aftermath didn't just impact the families of those involved. It sent ripples through the entire neighborhood, leaving behind a broken sense of security. If someone like Jennifer, a mother, a wife, a part of their community, could commit such an act, who could they trust? It wasn't just the murder of one man, it was the murder of trust, the collapse of what they had always assumed was safe and familiar. But beyond the tragedy, beyond the trial and the aftermath, there was a deeper, more unsettling question. What did Jennifer's actions say about the human condition? What was it about her brokenness, that led her down this path? In the years to come, the story of Jennifer Gledhill would serve as a chilling reminder of how far a person can fall when they abandon love, trust, and decency. Her story would be used as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unaddressed pain, of secrets left too long in the dark. It would remind us of the consequences of choosing to bury the truth, because eventually, the truth will always find its way to the surface. There is no coming back from what Jennifer did. The choice she made that night, on that quiet, unsuspecting evening, would forever change the lives of all those involved. For her, there was no redemption, no second chance. The consequences of her actions would be felt for generations. As for the community, for those who knew Matthew, they would forever carry the weight of his loss. They would remember him not as a victim, but as a symbol of the fragility of life, of how quickly everything can change. And in the end, the lesson was clear: trust, love, and loyalty are sacred. Once broken, they can never be restored in the same way. The damage that one person can do, whether intentionally or not, can echo across lives forever. Jennifer Gledhill's story will never be forgotten. And as the years go on, it will continue to serve as a haunting reminder that beneath the surface of even the most perfect lives, darkness can lurk, waiting for the moment to emerge. As we close this chapter on the tragic story of Jennifer Gledhill and Matthew, one truth remains undeniable: no one is immune to the darkness that can sometimes lie beneath the surface. This was not just a tale of betrayal, it was a reminder of the fragility of human relationships and the devastating consequences when trust is broken. There are moments in life when choices, seemingly small, seemingly insignificant, lead to irreversible consequences. Jennifer Gledhill's decision that night, driven by secrets, guilt, and a dark path she had walked too long, set off a chain of events that would forever alter the lives of everyone involved. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of this story is that, in many ways, it could have been prevented. The signs were there, the fractures were forming, but it took a single, irreversible act to expose the true extent of the damage. For Jennifer, the consequences were clear: a life behind bars, forever marked by the horror of her actions. But for everyone else, the ones left behind, the scars will remain. For Matthew's family, for the community that once knew them, for the children who grew up without a father, the pain never truly fades. And so, we're left to reflect on the nature of trust, betrayal, and the cost of secrecy. This tragedy will linger in the hearts of those affected for years to come. And for us, as we consider the story of Jennifer Gledhill, we are reminded that even in the most seemingly ordinary lives, there can be hidden darkness, and that sometimes, the truth is the most terrifying thing of all. The story of Jennifer Gledhill and Matthew Johnson serves as a reminder that the line between normalcy and tragedy is thinner than we think, and that sometimes, the greatest danger lies not in the actions of strangers, but in those we trust the most. If you found yourself captivated by the twists and turns of this tragic story, you're not alone. True crime holds a mirror up to the darkest corners of human nature, and as we've seen in Jennifer Gledhill's case, it's a reminder that even those we trust the most can harbor unimaginable secrets. If you want to explore more true crime stories, uncover hidden motives, and dive deep into the investigations that shape our world, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Every week, we bring you chilling, real-life stories of betrayal, deception, and the search for justice. Don't forget to hit the notification bell, so you never miss an update when we uncover the next unsolved mystery or unravel another shocking crime. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below to share your take on Jennifer's story. Was there something we missed? Or perhaps, like many others, you have your own theories about what led to this unthinkable act. Remember, the truth is always out there. And here, we're committed to finding it. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay aware, and as always, stay curious.